Okay, so last time I talked a little bit about this hobby project that I've been working on, trying to build a tech engine that kind of imagines what it would be like to write tech if we knew what we know now about the kind of things that we want to, be compiling, right? And how we want to do it. We want to output not to DVIs, but actually direct to PDF, or maybe even other formats like HTML. We want to use not legacy fonts, but modern fonts. We know that our computers want to do work in parallel, all these kind of things. I thought today I would talk about another kind of common complaint feature about the tech ecosystem, and that, of course, is error messages. So what I'm going to do, just to get things started, is compile using the, let's say, UA2 plain format, just a sample document that I put together for a second. So this error messages .tech file. And if I do that, I'm confronted with what I think is a pretty common experience, this wall of very traditional error messages, right? And you can see that there are undefined control sequences and overfull hboxes and missing math mode symbols and stuff like this. Messages that I've seen too often in my career. Right. And on the one hand, actually a lot of these error messages really do tell you, I think, exactly what you need to know, right? In this file, on this line, there is an undefined control sequence. This is the one that I recently read. It's right here. And this hard line break helps point out exactly where in the line it's sitting. And right after it, there's another one. It's right here. Right after that, there's another one. Here is an overfull hbox, so I've tried to squeeze too much text into a line. It's telling me what font is being used and where potential hyphenation spots are and where the line got truncated. There's a few of these overfull hbox messages, and then there's a bunch of these. There was a missing $sign somewhere, and I inserted it. And where did I do it? Somewhere around, after a paragraph token on line 27, or over here, or in a different file, so on and so forth. Okay. And on the one hand, that's, I think actually very helpful. On the other hand, it's like you have to learn a little bit how to actually read these error messages. And certainly, the style of error message predates a lot of what we are used to these days, right? Certainly, I do my code development in the post-expressive diagnostics era, right? So when I compile this project, right, I'm given these arguably more pretty printed, easier to read kind of messages that say, there's some file, and here, let me kind of help illustrate with these, the squiggles and the caret exactly what's going on. What are the warnings? There's this unused but set variable. I'm not using this index or whatever, right? In a lot of ways, like, this is the same kind of information that whatever the very early versions of GCC might have given you, but just in a format that I think is much more user-friendly, right? Kind of helps point out exactly what we should be looking at. So let's first take a little look. Oops, I didn't mean to open that. Let's first take a little look at the file that we are trying to compile here, errormessages.tech. Let's see what this looks like. So what is this? It's a file where I've just, for some reason, defined a macro that's just going to replay a bunch of text. Whatever. Not clear why you'd want to do that, but the LaTeX ecosystem is a wonderfully broad and diverse group of people deciding to do things in different ways. There's errors here that are clearly just typos. I've made the line width very small and then had some random sentence with only long words so that it's almost certainly going to force an overfull hbox. I do the same thing but using that macro defined up above. And then down here I have a bunch of ways of forgetting to close math mode, on the same line, or you have started math mode on one line and you close it on a different line, or maybe I'm even opening it here and closing it in a different file. So what is that file? Errormathstuff.tech. It's this thing that, it's going 10 is equal to 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. But then I forgot to, I should have done something like this, but I didn't. And then while I was here, I defined this, ridiculous macro that just takes a parameter, opens math mode, and then replays replays the content of that parameter immediately after. And so if I look down here, I have this open math, which is going to stick a $sign before this expression, and I've forgotten to do something like that. Okay, so that's what this file is. Let's go ahead and not save anything. What's the plan? What are we going to do to try to, take the information that the tech engine has and maybe hand back to us more expressive diagnostics, more expressive error messages? Well, the plan is, in a lot of ways, the same thing that I thought about doing when I was working on the font system, right? So for dealing with different fonts, I said, oh, well, let's just construct an abstraction where there's just some notion of an interface to some kind of font, and whether that's a legacy font or an OpenType font, the engine can query the font interface, and the font interface can give back whatever information is needed, glyph sizes or how to construct an extensible glyph or whatever. So you could imagine doing the same thing, but with the diagnostic system, right? Maybe there's some concept of a reporter, something that can log messages to the screen, to log files, whatever. And there's the way that Tech has traditionally done it, and maintaining this is, I think, important in its own right, and also makes it much easier to do automated trip test as part of the build system. But then you could say, oh, well, maybe what I want is to have an alternative to that, something which is a more expressive kind of thing, right? So, okay, so that's kind of what the overall strategy was. Let's take a look at what this looks like. So let me go ahead and open up this error-messages.tech file again. What I'm going to do is maybe comment out most of this so that we're not overwhelmed by a wall of error messages, and I can kind of talk through how the arguably more expressive system kind of goes through each of these different flavors of errors. Right? So what I'm going to do over here, just clear the screen, I'm going to do this from the beginning. I'm going to compile exactly the same file, except I'm just going to add this flag to the argument expressive errors that just tells the engine, swap out the Newthian reporter for this hopefully more expressive way of doing things. And this is something that you can do using I would say exactly the same kind of information that the Tech engine already has when it's printing these errors, right? So it knows that the error is of a flavor. Let's just make this a little bit bigger so that those line messages, the columns, stay on one column. It knows that there was an undefined control sequence. It knows exactly where it was in the code. Here it is. And it also knows the exact set of all macros currently, defined in the engine. And so you can just do some kind of this string is closest to another macro that I happen to know about. So try to do some kind of Clang, expressive diagnostics, point at it, give it a little squiggle and say, oh, I can try to be helpful and at least suggest some kind of typo correction. And you can see the same thing throughout this, undefined control sequence here. There was a transposition error. In C doot, I put in one too many O's. Maybe I meant C dot. Here I was just typing too fast and accidentally inserted the A character. Okay, maybe I meant at. Okay, great. So this is the kind of error that actually requires very little modifications to the engine in order to make arguably more expressive, hopefully more user-friendly. Let's go ahead and look at a different kind of category of error where what I'm going to look at is this overfull hbox. Right? So here, this is going to be something where there's two consecutive lines where the text is spilling out over this very narrow line width that I've specified. Here, in line 1, not of the source code, but line 1 of what the typesetter is trying to print. And here I've chosen for now not to do the printing of the discretionary nodes, where these hyphenation spots could be. There's an overfull error right here, this little hyphenation point. And then on the next line, there's a few characters that are sticking out over the edge. Right? And of course, this is a style of error where I think you want to display kind of the view from the typesetter. What are the lines of typeset text rather than the view from the source file, because the source file could be any arbitrarily unhelpful kind of piece of information, right? Because, for instance, we could have just, the source file could just be saying, I'm just using some random macro that was defined, anywhere, and I still want the error message to have something that's like, exactly what's going on. And here you can see I've even tried to here, this program tries to auto-detect the terminal width to decide how many characters to print. Let's just do this a little bit smaller. So here you can see I've inserted random math, and I've wrapped the equation in its own hbox so that the math won't be allowed to break onto the next line. And this is the kind of error that I wish I could diagnose more easily when I'm compiling my own documents. Where in the math equation is my equation spilling out over the margin, right? And so you can add these kind of diagnostics. Oh, the line right above the overfull line, that was loose, so there was a little bit, the glue was stretched really more than it wants to be. And then on this next line, oh, this is the character that's starting to protrude out into the margin. Right. Cool. Okay, let's uncomment that so that in our file we're back to normal whatever line widths or something, and talk about the last category of error that I'm going to specify here. So these are these, what happens when you forget to close math mode, or maybe when you've, incorrectly left vertical or horizontal mode or something like this. So having uncommented that, you can see that rather than just inserting, oh, here's where I had to put a $sign, you can try to be a little bit more helpful and say, this is the line of the source file that I was working with, line 26, and this is the location where you opened math mode, and this is where I had to put it, right? I was expecting when I got to this line to still be in math mode. Instead, the empty line triggered a paragraph token, and so I had to fix that because you incorrectly transitioned from math mode to vertical mode without closing math mode. Right? And this is the kind of thing that requires a little bit, but not too much, modification of the TeX engine. In order to know where math mode opened, I had to add a little bit of information to the semantic nest, the thing that keeps track of where are these transitions between modes that TeX knows about, horizontal mode and math mode and whatever. Where do those transitions take place? I kind of added a little bit of information. And, this is just for fun, I suppose. I'm just showing off. You can try to make the error messages display things in nice little sandwich formats. I'm not that good at some of the aesthetics of these error messages, but I've just been kind of having fun playing around. So when your math mode spans a lot of lines, you can say, oh, you opened it here, and you closed it here. And of course, this is going to work across different files. So if I, open math mode in one file and I forget to close it in a different file, I can have my error messages kind of express that to me, right? So there's this error, the missing $sign, from somewhere, I opened math mode in line 36 of this file, and I did not close it on line 2 or 3, depending on how you want to count exactly what is that new line doing. I forgot to close it over here. Right. And of course, there's also this thing about, well, what about using the macro that I defined in the other file and using that to open math mode, but then forget to close it? This may be, oh, look at that. I already wrote out what I was going to kind of vaguely talk about. Here you can see that the representation is telling us that the math mode was opened on this closing brace of the, macro that's supposed to take a parameter, and then it was closed over here. And, this maybe conveniently highlights some of the interesting interactions between the semantic nest and the scanner, and sometimes people talk about the eyes and the mouth and the stomach of TeX. Maybe one would want to have this math mode opened here point to the opening brace. Maybe you'd want to do a diagnostic little squiggle and say, this is the macro that opened math mode, or maybe here's the trace of macros that implicitly eventually opened math mode, or something like that. It's kind of a cost benefit between how many modifications to the engine do you want to make, what level of expressive diagnostics are you looking for, and frankly, there are a lot of different error messages in TeX, and some of them, I think, to make more expressive would really require a lot of interesting engineering work, maybe even tracking the full provenance of tokens throughout the entire sequence of typesetting and scanning and the full thing, whereas others required relatively little additional work. And so here I was just building out this more expressive style of error messages has been on the roadmap for a long time, and here this is just supposed to be a kind of proof of concept sort of. Here are a few representative categories of things that I was able to work on without kind of monkeying too much with the internals of the engine. So I hope that was kind of interesting. If you're interested in the kind of work that I've been doing, feel free to leave a comment down below, ask questions. I'd be happy to kind of go into more details about what the engine is doing. And maybe I was thinking every few weeks I would kind of try to put together a quick video like this talking about some aspect or other of what I've been thinking about. All right, so thanks very much for listening, and until next time.